You're not confined to the reality you're experiencing right now. There's more than one version of you, more than one version of your life. And you're switching between them constantly without even noticing. This idea isn't just fantasy or fiction. It's a growing topic of serious discussion among scientists, philosophers, and forward-thinking minds who are starting to recognize a radical possibility. That reality isn't fixed, it's fluid. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a concept that challenges everything you think you know about life, parallel realities. And how your consciousness plays a central role in choosing which version of reality you actually experience. We're going to explore how every decision, belief, and perception may not only influence your life, but could be selecting from an infinite array of coexisting timelines. Not metaphorically, literally. This isn't a theory designed to entertain. It's a framework that invites you to rethink the boundaries of time, identity, and physical space. You'll discover that you're not simply reacting to the world around you. You may actually be selecting which version of the world you're experiencing, based on your inner state. Throughout this exploration, we'll be drawing insights from quantum physics, particularly concepts like the many worlds interpretation, where every possibility plays out in a separate, equally real universe, as well as philosophical ideas that have echoed through ancient traditions and esoteric schools for thousands of years. You'll learn why your thoughts, beliefs, and focus are not just private, internal processes but powerful selectors, like coordinates, tuning you into specific timelines. This is not about abstract theories with no practical impact. This is about recognizing that your current reality is only one of countless options. And once you realize how selection works, you gain access to all of them, whether you're intrigued by the idea of shifting your life circumstances, curious about whether déjà vu or synchronicity is more than coincidence, or you feel like there's more to existence than what you've been taught, this conversation is for you. You're going to discover that parallel realities aren't just sci-fi. They're a reflection of the way consciousness might truly operate in a multi-layered universe. So get ready to go deep, not into fantasy, but into a deeper layer of what might actually be happening every single moment. Because once you start to see reality through this lens, you don't just experience life, you begin to shape it. Let's start with the foundation. You're living one version of life, but thousands of others exist right now, each one just as real, just as detailed, and just as accessible as the one you're experiencing. That's not a belief system. It's a serious idea within certain interpretations of modern quantum physics. Let's begin with the concept of quantum superposition. At the subatomic level, particles don't have one single state. They exist in all possible states simultaneously until observed. It's only when an observation takes place that the particle state collapses into a single outcome. Before that moment, every possibility exists in parallel. This brings us to the observer effect. The very act of measuring or observing a quantum system changes the outcome. Think about what that implies. Reality doesn't just happen independently of observation. The observer, and by extension consciousness, plays a role in determining what becomes real. Now enter the many worlds interpretation. This theory posits that every time a decision is made, or a particle state is resolved, the universe splits. All outcomes occur, but in separate, branching timelines. So when you choose left instead of right, both outcomes happen. One version of you turns left, another turns right, and each continues in its own stream of events. It's staggering, but here's where it gets more interesting. While science offers the mechanics, metaphysics provides insight into the implications. In metaphysical systems going back centuries, reality is often viewed not as a single linear timeline, but as a field of potentials. Everything already exists. What you experience is based on what you tune into. This is where consciousness becomes the focal point. Rather than creating from scratch, consciousness selects. It observes. It aligns. Like a radio that doesn't generate the signal, but chooses which station to receive, your awareness might be functioning as a tuner that locks into one stream of infinite potential outcomes. That tuning happens through perception, belief, and attention. So why don't we notice this happening? Because the transitions are often seamless. There are no flashing lights when you shift into a different version of your life. No announcements, but tiny shifts in your thinking. in your assumptions, in your expectations, maybe aligning you with a subtly different version of events. Everything appears stable only because your consciousness provides continuity. You assume you're experiencing a single thread of time and identity. But if all possibilities exist, and your focus determines which one you encounter, then what you call life is actually a flowing selection process happening moment by moment. This brings new meaning to the phrase, you create your own reality. It's not just positive thinking, it's literal navigation across a sea of timelines, based on where you place your consciousness. Now think of reality as a vast quantum field. Every version of you, successful, struggling, healthy, uncertain, joyful, afraid, already exists within that field. You are not pulling something new into existence. You are choosing which version to interact with. This is not metaphor. It's mechanics. From this lens, so-called miracles or sudden life changes are not exceptions. They are shifts in perception and alignment. You are moving into a universe where those things are possible, or even inevitable. Now let's revisit the observer effect. If the observed system collapses into a single state due to observation, what happens when that observation is loaded with belief, expectation, or emotion? The field responds accordingly. It doesn't judge. It matches. So if you consistently expect problems, you get the version of reality where those problems are real. If you expect opportunity, you begin seeing signs of it because you're no longer tuned to lack, but to potential. This shifts the paradigm entirely. You're no longer a passive participant in a predetermined world. You're not reacting to a reality imposed on you. You're selecting from an array of already existing outcomes based on the frequency of your consciousness. And this is where science and spirituality finally meet. The implications are enormous. If every version of you exists, if every outcome is already happening in some version of reality, and if your consciousness determines which one you experience, then alignment, awareness, and intentionality become your most powerful tools. Not to manipulate, but to navigate. This isn't about escape. It's not about denying current circumstances. It's about recognizing that you're not locked into them. When you understand the landscape of parallel realities, you begin to notice the subtle shifts. You become less attached to external control and more interested in internal clarity. Because clarity determines selection, focus becomes navigation, and belief becomes the map. Coming up next, we'll explore how consciousness may act as the navigator between dimensions, not just understanding these realities, but learning how to move between them through focus, intention, and vibrational alignment. Are you ready to understand how your inner state might be guiding every external outcome? Let's keep going. Your thoughts are not meaningless. They are not random noise, and they are not trapped inside your head. They are signals, patterns, vibrations, operating on a level far more powerful than you've been taught to believe. Right now, your consciousness is doing something extraordinary. It's acting as a navigator, a tuner, a frequency selector. And that's not just poetic language, it's a literal function that may explain why you end up in the reality you experience. And not one of the countless other versions that also exist. Every moment, your mind is broadcasting a vibrational pattern based on your focus, your emotions, your beliefs, and your self-image. That pattern isn't just creating an experience. It's selecting from infinite parallel outcomes. Let's make this very clear. You are not forcing reality to change. You are selecting a version that already exists. Think of this like tuning a radio. All frequencies are already present, but the station you hear is the one you're tuned into. Reality works in much the same way. All versions are present. You're tuned into one based on the frequency of your consciousness. So what determines your frequency? First, intention. Intention isn't wishful thinking. It's a focused directive. A choice made with clarity. When you set a strong intention, you begin orienting your consciousness toward a specific outcome. You're choosing a path. And when that intention is supported by belief, it becomes a powerful selector. Next, focus. Focus is where your energy goes. It's what you notice. It's what you interpret as meaningful. What you consistently focus on becomes the lens through which you view reality. and that lens determines which version of reality responds. Let's say you consistently focus on lack. You're not creating lack out of thin air. You're aligning with a version of life where lack is a defining feature. On the other hand, if your focus shifts to abundance, not as fantasy but as a practiced awareness, you begin tuning into a timeline where that version of reality is normal. Focus becomes the steering wheel. Now let's add in belief. Beliefs are not passive. They are the structural code of your personal universe. A belief is like a frequency lock. When you believe something deeply, you become attuned to the evidence of that belief in the world around you. Even if the belief is false, you will find validation for it, because you're aligned with a version of reality where that belief appears true. If you hold the belief that you're always unlucky, you'll tune into the version of life where unlucky events show up consistently. But that doesn't mean the other versions disappeared. It means you're not aligned with them, yet. Now comes the bridge between thought and experience. Resonance. Resonance is the energetic match between your inner state and the outer version of reality you're engaging with. It's not enough to think differently for a few minutes. The question is, do you resonate with the reality you say you want? For example, if you want a life of freedom but constantly feel burdened, your dominant resonance is not freedom, it's restriction. And so, you align with versions of reality that reflect that restriction. This is not punishment. It's just resonance. A match between signal and result. The good news? Resonance can be shifted, and you don't need to control the entire universe to do it. You only need to shift your signal. You are multidimensional consciousness operating through a physical form. You're not bound by this reality, you're participating in it. Your ability to shift realities doesn't depend on external permission. It depends on internal calibration. And calibration happens through consistent awareness and choice. This brings us to vibrational matching. Everything in reality at its core is vibrational. Whether it's a thought, an emotion, a belief, or a circumstance, it all carries frequency. When your internal frequency matches that of a different version of reality, you don't have to force anything. The alignment happens naturally. You move into that version of reality. This movement isn't physical. You don't walk through a portal. You don't notice the floor changing beneath you, but your experiences shift. Your opportunities shift. The people you encounter may change. Outcomes begin to reflect your internal state in a way that seems almost magical, but it's not magic. It's resonance at work. And this raises a vital point. The version of reality you're in now is not permanent. There's nothing final about where you are. You are not stuck here. You are not doomed to repeat patterns forever. You are simply tuned into one version of life, and you have the power to retune. That process starts with awareness. Awareness of your thoughts, not to judge them, but to observe them. Awareness of your beliefs, not to shame them, but to upgrade them. Awareness of your emotions, not to suppress them, but to understand what frequency you're emitting. From there, choice becomes available. You can choose to shift your focus. You can choose to align your beliefs with outcomes you actually desire. You can choose to stop reinforcing the timeline you no longer wish to experience. But choice only exists where awareness is present. You are the navigator, and your navigation system is always on. Whether you use it intentionally or by default, that's the only difference. Consciousness doesn't require anyone's approval to shift realities. It only requires clarity. This is not about denying challenges or pretending things are perfect. It's about learning how consciousness interacts with possibility, and how those interactions shape the version of life you inhabit. So the real question is, are you aware of the signal you're broadcasting? Because you're always tuning to something. The only question is whether that frequency is intentional or automatic. When it becomes intentional, that's when things start to change. Coming up next, we'll explore the concept of timeline shifting in practical terms. Not just the theory, but the signs, the sensations, and the ways you might already be doing it without even realizing. Are you ready to see how your life might have already shifted without warning? Let's keep going. You didn't fall into this exact version of life by chance. You arrived here through a series of small, often unnoticed shifts. And there's a strong possibility that you've already jumped timelines, more than once. That term, timeline jumping, can sound dramatic, but it doesn't always involve radical, movie-style changes. In fact, most shifts are subtle, seamless, so much so you barely register them. But they happen, and when you begin to notice the signs, you realize how fluid your experience of life truly is. Let's clarify what this means. In the framework of parallel realities, a timeline is simply a path through one version of existence. It contains a certain set of outcomes, a specific arrangement of events, and a defined version of you. But every moment carries the potential to shift paths, to slide into a slightly different timeline based on new choices, beliefs, or emotional states. That shift doesn't erase your memory or change the laws of physics, but it can shift outcomes, alter dynamics, and create new opportunities or challenges that weren't previously accessible. So how do you know if you've shifted? There are clues. Sometimes, it's the feeling that something is off, even though everything looks the same. A moment of recognition that doesn't make sense. A memory that doesn't align with the current version of events. These aren't just quirks of the brain. They could be fragments from a previous timeline, a signal that you've moved, and the mental residue is still catching up. Another clue, patterns that abruptly stop. Maybe you've struggled with the same issue for years, then one day, it's simply gone. No logical explanation, no final breakthrough, just a quiet disappearance of the problem. That could be a shift to a version of reality where that issue was already resolved. There's also the reverse, a sudden emergence of new dynamics, people, or events that feel as though they appeared out of nowhere. These aren't accidents. They are signs of alignment with a different version of reality, one that you may have selected unconsciously. And here's where the practice becomes powerful. You can move through timelines intentionally, not through force, not through willpower, but through vibrational alignment. When your internal frequency changes, your emotions, beliefs, focus, and expectations, your consciousness becomes incompatible with the timeline you were previously in. It doesn't destroy that timeline. It still exists, but you no longer match it. You're now tuned into a version of life that reflects your updated state. Let's say you've carried a deep belief that you're not good enough. That belief locks you into a timeline where rejection, struggle, and low self-worth play out regularly. But then something shifts, maybe you reprogram that belief. You internalize a new truth about your value. You hold it, feel it, live from it. Suddenly, people respond to you differently. Opportunities begin showing up. And it doesn't feel like a linear reward. It feels like you're in a different world. Because you are. That's a timeline shift. And it didn't require a spaceship. It required an internal recalibration. Here's another way to spot a timeline jump. A distinct sense that this version of life doesn't match the one you remember preparing for. Things have changed without explanation. Plans no longer make sense. People behave differently. Your own goals start to feel foreign. This is not disorientation. It's recalibration. Now, you might be wondering, can timeline shifting be controlled? To a degree, yes. But not in the way most people try to control things. You can't force your way into a different timeline through panic or desperation. But you can shift consistently and precisely by cultivating inner alignment. Here's how. First, practice state awareness. Before you can shift timelines intentionally, you must know what you're broadcasting now. Take inventory of your emotional and mental state. Notice recurring thoughts. Track dominant emotions. Identify any limiting patterns that you might be reinforcing without realizing it. Second, cultivate clarity of preference. Vague desires create vague results. If you want to shift to a timeline where a specific outcome exists, you must know what that outcome looks and feels like. Clarity creates resonance. The more specific and aligned your preference is, the easier it becomes for your consciousness to match that version of reality. Third, generate emotional coherence. This is the most crucial component. If your thoughts say abundance, but your emotions are rooted in fear, the emotional signal will dominate. Coherence means that your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs all send the same message. When that happens, the alignment is powerful, and timeline shifts become smoother and more visible. Now let's address a common question. How long does it take to shift timelines? There's no fixed answer. Time is a variable within timelines, not a constant outside of them. Some shifts feel instantaneous. Others unfold gradually. The key is not to rush the process, but to maintain the frequency of the reality you want to experience. The shift happens when your inner world no longer matches your current external conditions, because the mismatch becomes unsustainable. Reality at that point reorganizes, not through external magic, but through internal resonance. Also important, you must release the need to prove that you've shifted. Demanding external confirmation slows the process. It reflects doubt. Your job is to hold the frequency, not to interrogate the outcome. Over time, consistent shifts create a new baseline. What once felt extraordinary becomes normal. Your external world begins reflecting your internal clarity in every area: relationships, health, creativity, abundance. And once you experience even one clear timeline shift, your understanding of reality changes permanently. You no longer treat life as something happening to you. You recognize it as something happening through you. You stop clinging to circumstances. You start calibrating your consciousness, because that's the real control panel. Now, a word of caution. Shifting timelines doesn't guarantee a problem-free existence. Every version of life contains contrast. But when you shift, you move into a version of contrast that matches your capacity to respond, grow, and expand, rather than contract and suffer. The difference is not in what happens. It's in how aligned you feel within the experience. That alignment is everything. So, whether you've knowingly jumped timelines or not, you're doing it. The question is whether you're doing it on purpose. And from this point forward, you can. Up next, we'll go even deeper into the mechanics of how your emotions and beliefs act as the key codes to reality, why they're not just reactions, but the very frequencies you use to shift between parallel universes. Are you ready to take control of the signal you're sending? Let's keep going. Your emotions are not just fleeting responses to external events. They are tuning signals. Deeply encoded frequencies that align you with specific outcomes. And your beliefs, they're not just ideas you think about. They are anchors, filters, mechanisms through which you select your version of reality. Every moment, your emotional state and belief system are acting together to decide which version of the universe you're aligned with. Most people live unaware of this process, unconsciously selecting timelines based on outdated emotional patterns and inherited belief structures. Let's start with emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. It's not something that happens to you. It's a transmission, a vibrational statement that says, "This is what I'm tuned to." That tuning doesn't just affect your mood. It determines your alignment. When you are in a state of joy, appreciation, or gratitude, your frequency rises. That frequency isn't metaphorical. It's measurable. Your body emits a different electromagnetic signal. Your thoughts shift. Your perceptions change. And, most importantly, your reality selection mechanism activates. Suddenly, you begin to resonate with versions of the world where good things happen more easily, where resistance is lower, and where people respond to you more favorably. You're not manipulating external reality, you're aligning with a version of it that already exists at that frequency. Now flip that around. Let's say you're in fear, guilt, or powerlessness. Those emotions don't just affect your mindset. They place you in resonance with timelines where fear, guilt, and powerlessness are not just emotions, they're themes. You begin to experience more of what you're feeling, not because life is punishing you, but because you are matched with a version of reality that reflects your internal state. This is why emotional awareness is non-negotiable. Ignoring how you feel doesn't protect you. It simply ensures that you keep aligning with a reality that mirrors those hidden emotions. Now, on to belief. Beliefs are the structure around which your personal universe is built. They form the blueprint that determines what you consider possible, what you expect, and what you notice. A belief is not passive. It's not just a thought you agree with. It's a constant command being sent out from your consciousness that says, "Only show me evidence of this being true." So if you believe that people can't be trusted, your mind will block out trustworthy experiences. It will amplify moments of betrayal, and it will keep you on a timeline where trust is absent. If you believe that success is hard and requires suffering, you'll align with a version of life where ease is impossible and struggle is the default. The timeline you experience is shaped by the permission slips written by your beliefs. Change those beliefs and you change the range of timelines you can access. Now let's talk about how emotion and belief interact. Emotions are indicators of your vibrational state. Beliefs determine the boundaries of that state. Together, they create the signal that selects your universe. Let's say you're trying to create a better reality. You visualize success. You affirm abundance. You focus on gratitude. But underneath all that, you still carry the belief, I don't deserve it. That belief will override the emotion. It becomes the dominant selector. Your visualizations might feel good, but the moment your belief contradicts them, your signal becomes scrambled, confused, and so the reality you experience reflects that internal contradiction. Partial results, mixed signals, and frustration. This is why belief work is not optional, it's essential. You must examine what you truly believe, not just what you want to believe. To shift your timeline effectively, your beliefs must be upgraded to match your emotional aspirations. So how do you do that? First, identify core beliefs that are actively shaping your reality. Not just surface-level ideas, but deeply held assumptions about yourself, others, and the world. Look for statements that start with, I always, people never, that's just the way it is. These are hidden belief codes, default settings that are directing your consciousness. Next, question them. Are they true? Or were they installed by past experiences, cultural programming, or emotional trauma? Just because a belief feels real doesn't make it accurate. Beliefs feel real because you've repeated them so often that they've become embedded in your perception. Then, choose new beliefs intentionally. You don't have to wait for external proof. The proof comes after the shift. You begin by choosing beliefs that are aligned with the reality you prefer to experience. For example, I am supported. I create with clarity. My desires are valid and achievable. Life responds to my energy. Repeat them with emotion, not as empty affirmations, but as energetic declarations. Let them saturate your consciousness. Pair them with elevated emotional states, joy, trust, relief, and you begin broadcasting a coherent signal. That coherence is what allows you to shift. Let's address another critical point. Emotion is your confirmation signal. When a belief is aligned with your desired reality, it will feel light, energizing, even exciting. That's not just optimism. That's your system confirming alignment. When a belief feels heavy, contracting, or fearful, it means there's a vibrational mismatch. That belief does not match the frequency of the reality you're aiming for. Use this emotional feedback system to recalibrate. And remember, this isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about listening to it. Emotional suppression doesn't change your signal. It just buries it deeper, making it harder to correct. Let your emotions speak. Let your beliefs be exposed. And then shift them not through force but through alignment. The process is not instant, but it is effective. Every moment you spend in emotional and belief coherence, you are actively tuning into a timeline that reflects that state. The longer you hold it, the more real it becomes, not because you forced it to happen, but because you became a vibrational match. And once that match is sustained long enough, reality bends to meet it. You'll notice events changing, people showing up differently, opportunities emerging where none existed before. That's not magic. It's resonance. It's the natural result of emotional and belief alignment. So the next time you're feeling stuck, blocked, or uncertain, don't look outside for rescue. Look at your current emotional state. Examine your dominant beliefs, and recognize that these two elements are actively choosing your universe every second. Next, we'll get even more precise. You'll learn step-by-step methods for selecting the reality you actually want to experience through mental rehearsal, frequency training, and direct alignment with your desired outcomes. Are you ready to stop reacting and start selecting? Let's continue. You're already selecting your reality every day, every moment. But unless you're doing it consciously, you're just repeating the same patterns with slightly different scenery. The real power lies in knowing how to choose intentionally, to select the version of life that reflects your true preferences, values, and vision, not your fears or your conditioning. The process of conscious reality selection is not mystical. It's methodical. It involves clarity, alignment, repetition, and emotional precision. The more intentional you become, the more consistent the results. Let's start with one of the most effective tools in the process: visualization with emotion. Visualization is not just about seeing an image in your mind. That's only half the process. The real power comes when that image is paired with elevated emotion. Your brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. When you visualize with strong emotion, you begin to create neural patterns and energetic frequencies that match the version of reality you're aiming for. Here's how to use this effectively. Choose a specific scene from your desired timeline. Not a vague concept like success or happiness. A moment, a snapshot of your life in that reality. Maybe you're receiving an award, signing a contract, sitting with your future partner, walking into your dream home. Hold that image. Now bring emotion into it. How would you feel in that moment? Confident? Grateful? Free? Inspired? Let that emotion build. Let it flood your system. This combination, focused vision and genuine feeling, creates a signature frequency. You're not daydreaming. You're aligning. And the more often you enter that state, the more familiar it becomes to your nervous system. That emotional familiarity is what allows the shift to happen without resistance. Next, use scripting and mental rehearsal. Scripting is the written form of conscious selection. You're writing a detailed narrative of your desired life, as if it's already happening. Not "I want this," but "this is my life now." The language you use matters. Create structure for your focus. Write with clarity, confidence, and emotion. I wake up energized. My work feels meaningful. I receive unexpected opportunities daily. I trust myself deeply. Read it back to yourself often. Feel it. Let it rewire your inner dialogue. Mental rehearsal is the spoken version of this practice. Speak your desired reality out loud. Confidently, consistently. Not just when you're feeling good, but especially when you're doubting. Because that's when your old timeline is trying to pull you back. Use phrases like, "This is the version of me I choose to experience. I align with the reality where things flow with ease. I no longer identify with struggle. The timeline I'm choosing now is filled with clarity, support, and expansion." You're not begging the universe. You're tuning yourself. Now, understand the power of acting in alignment. If you say you're choosing a timeline where you're healthy and energized, but your habits reinforce exhaustion, you're sending a mixed signal. The fastest way to integrate a new timeline is to act like someone who already lives in it. This isn't pretending, it's calibrating. When you take actions that match your desired reality, you begin to dissolve the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Every small, consistent action becomes a vote for the timeline you're choosing. This could mean setting new boundaries, changing your language, making different decisions about time, money, relationships, and health. Don't wait for your external world to change before you shift your behavior. Your behavior is what opens the doorway to the new timeline. Now, let's address common pitfalls in this process. Doubt is the biggest disruptor. When you start aligning with a new timeline, your old identity will often protest. It will say, "This isn't working. Nothing's changing. Who do you think you are?" That's not a sign of failure. That's friction from the old timeline losing influence. The key is not to eliminate doubt immediately, it's to recognize it without reinforcing it. Don't spiral into resistance. Observe the doubt. Let it pass. Recenter on your chosen vision. Return to your script. Reconnect to the emotion. You're training your consciousness to stop reacting to the past and start anchoring in the future you prefer. Another pitfall: checking for results too soon. When you constantly look for external confirmation, you slow the process. You communicate that you don't trust the shift. Reality responds to inner certainty, not external anxiety. So hold the frequency. Trust the signal. Let results catch up to your alignment. And remember, you don't need overwhelming force to shift timelines. Small, consistent alignment is more effective than dramatic gestures. 5 minutes of true resonance is more powerful than an hour of scattered focus. You are not forcing the universe to obey you. You are simply matching the version of reality that's already aligned with who you're becoming. That's a subtle but essential distinction. Now let's address another element: identity upgrading. You can't consistently experience a reality that contradicts who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who's always behind, always struggling, always missing the mark, you will unconsciously reject timelines that contradict that self-concept. So choose a new identity, one that matches your desired timeline, and start reinforcing it. Say, I am the version of myself who attracts aligned opportunities. I make decisions from clarity, not fear. I handle my challenges with wisdom and calm. This is who I am now. Repeat it. Live it. Let your behaviors, emotions, and thoughts support that identity. Over time, this new self-concept becomes your default. And when your identity changes, your reality must follow. Because the timeline you're on cannot sustain a version of you that no longer matches. The old timeline collapses, not with fanfare, not with explosions, but with quiet irrelevance. You wake up one day and realize the problems you used to fight don't show up anymore. The struggles you accepted as normal feel foreign. The people around you treat you differently because you treat yourself differently. That's how reality selection works. It's not about convincing the world to change. It's about becoming the version of yourself who naturally aligns with the reality you've been seeking. And once you make that shift consistently enough, it becomes effortless. The new timeline becomes your normal. The old one becomes a story you no longer tell. Next, we're going to bring it all together. You'll learn how to live day to day with multidimensional awareness, holding the knowledge that every moment is a choice, and every choice is a portal to a different version of reality. Are you ready to live like a conscious navigator? Let's continue. There's a shift that happens when you no longer see yourself as a passive participant in life, but as an active selector of experience. And once that shift locks in, once you begin to grasp that your reality is not fixed but chosen, you start living differently. Not because you're escaping anything, but because you're aware of something most people never question: that you exist across dimensions, that you are not limited to one timeline, and that every moment offers you a fork in the road, visible or not. This is multidimensional awareness. It's not about abandoning the physical world. It's about mastering it through clarity, intention, and energetic alignment. To live this way requires a new type of focus, one that's less about control and more about conscious calibration. Here's what that looks like in practice. You start the day not by checking your to-do list, but by checking your state. Before any action, before any output, you tune into the signal you're emitting. You ask, what frequency am I on right now? Is it clarity, stress, expectation, doubt, peace? You don't judge it, you register it. Because whatever your frequency is, that's the timeline you're currently aligning with. Throughout the day, you return to this awareness. You pause not out of obligation, but because you understand the cost of unconscious momentum. You know that rushing through without checking your state is the fastest way to reinforce old patterns. Multidimensional awareness means you're willing to stop, reset, and choose again, multiple times a day. Not because you're broken, but because you're sculpting reality through presence. Next, you start watching your language, not in a superficial way but as a signal. Words are containers of belief. And every time you say, I always mess this up, or nothing ever works, or I knew this would go wrong, you're reinforcing the timeline that holds those outcomes. So you begin to speak like someone who understands the mechanics of selection. You use phrases that match the version of life you want to engage with. Things are unfolding in ways that support me. This challenge is showing me something I need to see. Even when I don't understand it, I trust the direction. My energy matters more than my circumstances. This isn't about pretending. It's about programming. Your language becomes a direct expression of your frequency. And when your language, thoughts, and emotions are aligned, you're not hoping for change, you're selecting it. Now let's go deeper. Living in multidimensional awareness means you stop needing external reality to validate you. You understand that by the time you see it, it's already the result of a previous signal. So you stop reacting to what's in front of you as if it's the absolute truth. You treat it as feedback, as confirmation of a previous alignment. And if the feedback isn't what you prefer, you don't panic. You shift. You go inward. You recalibrate. You return to the vision. You reconnect to the version of you that lives in the timeline you prefer. This shift in orientation changes everything. You stop chasing outcomes. You start curating energy. You stop fighting with people and circumstances. You start refining your signal. You stop looking for proof that it's working. You start feeling the resonance, trusting that the field is already adjusting. This is what it means to live like a creator, not in a mystical sense, but as a deeply practical, embodied truth. And here's the beauty of it. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Your nervous system adapts. Your intuition sharpens. Your ability to discern between timelines gets faster. You recognize sooner when something doesn't match, and you course correct with less drama. Over time, multidimensional awareness becomes your default. You're not constantly efforting. You're tuned in. You're receptive. You're clear. You begin to notice synchronicities, not as magic tricks, but as signs that you're aligned with a coherent version of reality. You experience flow not as luck, but as confirmation that you're holding the frequency long enough for life to match it. You engage with contrast not as punishment, but as an opportunity to fine-tune your choices. Because that's all life becomes through this lens. A series of choices, each one aligning you with a different version of the whole. Now let's be honest. This isn't a lifestyle for everyone. It requires presence. It requires honesty. It requires taking full ownership of your signal, even when it's uncomfortable. But for those who are ready, it's a life of liberation. You no longer wait for something to rescue you. You stop outsourcing your power to systems, circumstances, or other people. You become the point of origin. And that doesn't mean everything becomes perfect. It means everything becomes purposeful. It means every challenge carries information. Every moment becomes a chance to realign, realign, realign. So, how do you keep this awareness alive? First, daily recalibration can be as simple as one question. What reality am I choosing with this thought, this emotion, this reaction? That one question asked consistently will change your life. Second, emotional mastery. This doesn't mean controlling emotions. It means understanding them, feeling them without becoming them, letting them inform your alignment, not dictate your behavior. Third, intentional rituals. Whether it's scripting, meditation, movement, or breath work, commit to practices that reconnect you to your preferred frequency. Do them before you need them. Let them become part of your rhythm, not just your recovery. And finally, identity anchoring. Live as the version of you who already exists in the timeline you prefer. Ask, what does that version of me believe? How do they respond? How do they treat their energy? Let your behavior match the future, not the past. That is the essence of quantum living. That is the foundation of multidimensional awareness. You stop reacting. You start selecting. You stop asking, what's going to happen to me? You start declaring, this is the reality I choose to align with. And from there, life begins to mirror your intention with greater and greater accuracy. So whether you're just beginning this journey or already walking between timelines with awareness, remember this, you are not stuck. You are not waiting. You are not lost. You are choosing. Right now. Always. The only question is, what version of life are you choosing next? Thank you for watching. If this spoke to something deep within you, don't just think about it. Live it. Stay conscious. Stay clear. And remember, you are never at the mercy of your reality. You are its architect,